Good morning, students. Today we are going to read the chapter The World in a Wall by Gerald Durrell. This extract is taken from Gerald Durrell's book My Favorite Family and Other Animals. When Durrell was young, his family lived in a villa on the Greek island of Corfu. This was a time of bliss for him, for he did not go to school but roamed about the countryside at will. He befriended the many creatures he came across and wrote of his experiences with a touch of humor. He used to run a zoo in the Jersey Island, having brought animals there from all over the world. So, here, uh, the crumbling wall that surrounded the sunken garden alongside the house was a rich hunting ground for me. That was the rich hunting ground for Geralt. One of Gary's favorite places is the crumbling wall. What he is just going to describe here that surrounded the garden. It's plastered brick, though the plaster is cracked and moss grows over the whole thing. He spends hours watching the different creatures that stalks along the wall. Gerald is especially entranced by the scorpions that live under the loose plaster. He finds them charming, unassuming, and mostly safe. Assuming he doesn't touch them, he even observes bits of their courtship rituals which they undertake at night. The family forbids Gary from keeping a colony in the house, much to his displeasure, as that would allow him to see all of their courtships. One day, Gerald finds a female scorpion covered in a mass of tiny babies. He decides he must capture her so he can watch the babies grow up. So he traps her in a matchbox and heads for the villa. He arrives at lunchtime, places the box on the mantel, and goes to lunch, his new catch entirely forgotten. When Larry is finished eating, he goes in search of cigarette and matchsticks and returns to the table. He puts a cigarette in his mouth and unsuspectingly opens the matchbox. The annoyed scorpion darts onto his hand and things go downhill from there. Larry screams and flings the scorpion onto the table, scattering babies everywhere, and Roser begins barking wildly and bites Lugartizia, while Leslie and Margot screams. The scorpions hide under plates and cutlery. Gary convinces his family to not kill the scorpion and spends the next half hour collecting the babies. He reluctantly carries the mother back outside and releases her onto the wall. Larry is terrified of the matchboxes after this, and mother decides that it's time for Gary to receive more education. She engages the Belgian council to tutor Jerry in French. For their first lesson, the Belgian council asks Gary to read from a French book after Gary reads a few words. The Belgian consul Stephens exclaims something and pulls out an air rifle. Gary watches, perplexed and little afraid. As the consul loads the rifle, crouches by the window and fires at something. After the consul shoots, Gary notices tears in his eyes, but he asks Gary to finish his reading. It takes Gary a week to discover that the Belgian council is shooting the starving and sticky cats that breeds unchecked in his neighborhood. He is a great cat lover and can't stand to see the strays looking so poorly. Gary recognizes he is doing a great service for the cats, and after each shot, he and the council observe a moment of silence. The Belgian, Belgian council believes that mother speaks French and tries to engage her in conversation. Whenever he sees her, she does her best to avoid him. And Gary believes that the council never discovers that mother's only world of French is oh. The conversations are nerve-wracking for her, and Gary, Larry, Leslie, and Margot sometimes whisper to her that the council is coming just to watch her tear off down the streets. Theodore comes every Thursday afternoon and stays until evening. Theodore's choice to come on Thursday is purposeful. The seaplane from Athens lands on Thursday in the bay not far from the Durrell's villa. And watching it land is something that Theodore greatly enjoys. When they hear it coming, Mother tortures Theodore for a few minutes before inviting him to the attic to watch. On these Thursday afternoons, Theodore and Gary go out with Roger to collect uh, specimens. Theodore seems to know everything, but he teaches Gary in such a way as to make Gary feel as though he is simply being reminded of facts he forgot. Theodore is especially knowledgeable about aquatic life and tells Gary about caddies fly larvae, which build cells out of the whatever they can find as they wander along the bottom of the ponds. On the subject of building, Theodore tells Gary about a friend who decided to add another story to his house and threw a party once the construction was over. At the party, he discovered he neglected to add stairs. He and the workmen had been exclusively using the scaffolding and never noticed. So, that was the interesting story about these uh, speakers, and here it has been discussed that the result of the incidents were numerous, and Larry developed a phobia about matchboxes and opened them with the utmost caution, a handkerchief wrapped around his hand. Okay, Lugagia limped round the house, her ankle enveloped in yard of the bandage for weeks after the bite has healed. But from my point of view, the worst repercussion of the whole affair was the mother decided I was running with wild again, and it was high time I received a little more education. So that was the author's point of view towards the family members and towards the rest of the creatures. So read this lesson once more and try to understand. Have a nice day. Goodbye.